Thank you so much, Marcia, for co-hosting this particular episode of our show. I'm so glad to be interviewed on it, and I just want to give you a shout out that Marcia Adams is a co-host of our show today, interviewing yours truly, and I'm so happy that you're doing it. So thank you for welcoming me to my show. And today, I'm delighted to talk to you about the subject of the path in life and how we are living often unbeknownst to ourselves, traveling down a certain path. If we are not aware of our path in life, then we are traveling unconsciously, helter skelter, so to speak, if we want to become conscious travelers on this path. Well, we need to figure out what path we're on and whether or not we want to be on this path. How is it working for you to be on this path?
Like, I look at my life and it was just real happenstance. I made a lot of decisions in the moment that took me to the next step. But looking at your life, clearly 40 years of practice, you were very young when your path started. Can you share a little bit about your path and its beginning, things along the way? How'd you get to be here?
For myself, I asked myself this kind of questions many, many times, starting from a relatively young age, because I started at the age of 6, and I literally had to figure out who I wanted to be. I know my parents, my grandparents would ask me once in a while, like, who do you want to be? I didn't really know what I wanted to be, so I would say all kinds of strange things like I wanted to be a soldier. And my grandfather would say, well, don't you want to be like a general? I'm like, no, I want to be a soldier. Okay, fine. And of course, um, two of my grandparents were lawyers, so they would ask me like, well, don't you want to become a lawyer? I'm like, no, I don't want to be a lawyer. Um, but one of my grandparents was a Qigong master, and so I was really excited to become like him because he was really a cool dude, very strong, very capable physically, also smart as a whip, and had this bizarre personal history that we would not talk about. Like, he would not disclose what he would do when he was young and did all kinds of things. So that obviously added some mystique to it. But at the same time, also, I knew that I wanted to be like him because he was very capable. And that's basically what installed me on this path. But of course, I also would get into all kinds of troubles that challenged me to see, well, am I on the right track? Anything from just getting in fights when I was a schoolboy to being in the military and special forces and doing search and rescue operations and also going on kind of wild and crazy expeditions in the wilderness and the caves. I did a lot of caving and spelunking, and also learning all kinds of spiritual practices from meditation to dream yoga. And all of this eventually coalesced for me in a way that it was almost like too good to be true. Basically, all my martial arts training and all my energy arts training on all my healing practices and spiritual practices and personal development practices actually ended up being part of the whole system that I found out I was learning from the get-go. So in a sense, I wasn't even aware how profound the system was until years later. And when I saw the big picture, I was like, damn, that's impossible for one human being to create that. Well, of course, it wasn't created by one human being, it was created by generations of practitioners and masters. And so that basically is what we call a lineage. And when I became a lineage holder, it was also a major responsibility. Now I have to perpetuate this lineage. So not just enjoy the practice for my own benefits, but also be responsible for training the new generation of practitioners. And so that obviously is a responsibility that I have to take good care of at this point in time. So I basically train people not only because I want them to benefit from the practice, but also because I'm looking for the right people who would be the next generation practitioners that would potentially perpetuate this lineage further.
From very early on, you had significant people in your life who were able to guide you in a specific direction. And I would say enlightened people who didn't get in your way, but they guided you in a certain direction. And probably true in my life that my parents wanted to guide me in a certain direction, but there was nothing about what they were trying to guide me to that I wanted to be a part of. So my path got filled up with do anything but that. Let me be just rebellion for the sake of rebellion.
Reaction is a popular emotional state that most people grow up with. They react to what they're being told, to what they've been expected to do, and action against oncoming forces, which is what reaction means,
Right.
is often not very productive. It's not creative activity. It's just reacting to what somebody else tells us or enforces. Basically, if we want to really live our lives purposefully, it would make sense to create a more creative way of dealing with ideas or stimuli we receive from others.
Well, you hear that in conversation nowadays. People will talk about, I'm going to be on a life path, or I'm seeking my purpose, or I don't know what my purpose is. And I think there's kind of a new generation conversation that's making way for that kind of talk. But most people are in their 30s and 40s saying, what's my purpose? And unaware, like I really felt unaware that all of the lessons I had been through in life, all the steps along that path, were actually a valuable tool. I was gaining the experience, like you said, but I was oblivious to it until I reached a certain point where something that I thought was kind of negative in my life, for a period of my life with my 3 kids as a single parent, I was living on food stamps and welfare. After that, I saw the real value of what that was. It taught me resourcefulness beyond belief, okay? And compassion for other people who still in those same situations today. I got to put that in my tool belt, as something to take with me on the journey. So, what do you see when we talk about things like intentionally creating a life path and being present to what it is to be on the journey, knowing that, like the term right livelihood, that you are earning your right livelihood. So many people go to work doing something just to earn money and it's not their passion. And heaven forbid, being committed to self-development. How does that fit into the path and the journey?
Well, it fits perfectly because the right livelihood obviously is the livelihood that's in alignment with the rest of your life, with the values, with your beliefs, and with the direction towards your dreams. If the livelihood that you pursue or that affords you lifestyle is misaligned with your values, you will have either a hard time doing that job, or you will have your values compromised and you will feel like you're constantly shooting yourself in the foot or basically feeling incongruent. If your dreams are not in alignment with your livelihood, then basically you will feel like you're going further and further away from your dreams instead of getting closer or beginning to manifest them. So again, we have to reassess both sides of the equation. Well, how are my dreams? How aware am I of my dreams? That's one thing. And now, what kind of livelihood is it really that works for me? How well is it working for me? Is this the only thing I could be doing with my life and with my time on earth? And how well is it providing? And how beneficial is it for others? And how congruent am I if I'm pursuing this course of action? So basically, these simple questions that probably don't really come to mind to most people are very important for us to ask ourselves as we progress along the path. And then as we progress, it's guaranteed that there's going to be some turning points. In other words, the path usually is not straight and narrow. There's going to be some zigzags. And when we arrive to the turning point, it often feels like, oh, shit hits the fan. I don't know what to do. I'm confused, or I'm scared, or I'm uncomfortable. And so what happens is that we basically usually perceive those turning points as problems. And we struggle against them, and we try to fix them, because we don't believe that this path should turn. We were so okay with the direction as we were progressing along the path suddenly. Why should we turn? Now, if we were not okay, maybe we will perceive this as a blessing in disguise. We actually feel like, yeah, that's okay that our path changed and we turned somewhere in a different direction. But even when we were okay with the old path, it's still not a problem if we have to change our direction, because it may teach us something new. And if we perceive this change in the direction not as a problem, but as a learning opportunity, we will learn a great deal. Maybe we will learn that this new direction is not the appropriate direction, and we will consciously change. And so then the change will happen not because it's just some uncanny forces externally motivate us to go in some other direction. It's more like we actually decide that this direction is not working for me. Let's change the course of action and find a different direction. Now we would be at the crossroad, which direction to choose. And most people's decision making is based on really outmoded way of making decisions based on ideas what's good and what's bad. Something like a download that they received from their parents or from the media or from society in general. Well, we know that what's good for one person may not be good for another person. But if everyone tells you this is a good way to go, you may assume that maybe they're right. And so you will go where others think is good. In other words, there is no authenticity in that decision making. And most importantly, it's not based on your perception of energy resonance. How well do you resonate with this new course? Or if you have a choice between several courses of action, can you actually sense which of them feels like it's in greater resonance with your energy that you identify with? Now, the energy that you identify with is not all there is to you. You are an infinite being with a smorgasbord of energies of which you identify with a relatively narrow bandwidth usually. And that's who we basically think that we are. Just the tip of the iceberg as compared to the huge being that we really are. So we learn to accept that at this point in time, this is who I think I am. And we become conscious of how we identify with this particular being that we think we are, including energy associated with that way of being. But we also realize that if we choose a course of action that we don't resonate with, we may either struggle because the flow isn't going there and we will be going against the flow, or we may be on the cusp of learning something new about ourselves. If we change our energy, it may actually align better with a new course of action. So then there is also the question of malleability of our sense of identity, or just being open-minded and open to change. And that change is usually what a lot of people come to me for. They come to me because they say, I'm sick and tired of living this way. I want to experience change. And of course, I say, well, do you realize that it's not the change in outside, in external circumstances that you're really looking for? You're really looking forward to experiencing the change within that will almost by default also feel like there is a change happening without. Does it make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And has me look at in the path that I have been on, and I'm sure this is common for many people, the urgings of people around me to go in a certain direction that I chose not to go. Okay. Fast forward so many years, I'm a little bit more aware my values are different. I'm now in a state of kind of reflecting on the things that have happened in my life. Right? This was good, that was bad, like you say, and now learning to be objective about those things. But I ask myself, like, what would my life have been now had I followed that path that somebody else was trying to urge me on? And there's a kind of an emotional state that I would call regret or remorse, that I'll never have that opportunity. There's something that I walked past on the path and didn't have the choice. So, share with me about the use of those, of reflecting and reviewing and dealing with the emotions that come out of that process so it's usable for future decision making.
Yeah, this is a really important aspect of our conversation. I would say you're not the only one who experiences remorse or regret. Probably most people experience these feelings from time to time when they think about the past. And that's basically 50% of the time that people think about either past, and the other 50% is when they think about the future. Very few people can actually focus their attention on the present moment. And granted, the present moment is also such a fleeting gap between the huge, vast plateau of the past and another vast plateau of the future. So basically, what's happening right now, it's hard to even fathom or to capture. You can take a snapshot of it, but that's not how our mind works. And so we basically hardly ever spend any time in the present moment. We're always daydreaming about what may happen in the future, or we're thinking, reminiscing, remembering what happened in the past, which is another form of daydreaming. Right. So in other words, we're constantly daydreaming. Okay. Once we recognize the true nature of the mental process that's going on, how can we apply the principles of spiritual awakening and dream yoga to become lucid in these dreams? We can actually awaken to the true nature of the dreaming process happening in our minds. And when we do that, we realize that, daydreaming and night dreaming use the same mechanism of dreaming. You can become lucid in a dream at night, which is what dream yoga is about first and foremost. But we can also become lucid in our daydreams. As a matter of fact, it's a lot easier to become lucid in our daydreams because we're not asleep. And we can benefit a great deal from our lucidity, from awakening within the dream. Why? Because we may actually consciously dream about things instead of experiencing it as though it's been done to us. Nobody does dreaming to us.
Right.
We dream it up ourselves. It's just an unconscious process. So if we actually step into the identity of the creator of the dream, or at least stop feeling like we're a victim of somebody doing it to us, well, first of all, we will never experience a nightmare anymore. Right. Or very infrequently, because we'll just realize, interesting, I'm giving myself a nightmare. How is that working? Oh, it's not working so great. Well, maybe I will just focus my attention on something else. Why am I talking about attention? That's because it's the key to resolving or dissolving nightmares. If you want to create a nightmare, just go against the flow of the dream, and you're guaranteed to experience a nightmare of a night dream or a daydream. And if you are sick and tired of experiencing nightmares, Then, obviously, learning about the flow of the dream and learning how to align yourself with that flow would allow you to stop experiencing nightmares and actually enjoy the ride. So that's one of the things that we learn. We recognize that our thoughts about the past, all our reminiscing, all our memories are made of the energy of consciousness. All the images that pop up in our minds are nothing but energy fields, and they have certain flow to them. If we recognize that we resonate with some of them better and don't resonate with some of them so well, and it's not black and white, of course, it's all on scale from greater resonance to less resonance, or vice versa. It gives us an ability to choose what to focus on. And if we focus on something that we don't resonate with, well, that's how we create our own nightmare. That's how we cause ourselves regrets and remorse and other types of suffering, including being angry about ourselves or other people, or being sad about something that shouldn't have happened, or sad that something we wanted to happen didn't happen. There are many reasons why we can become sad about things, or angry, or remorseful, or maybe even feel guilty about something that happened in the past. How about we learn to recognize that whatever happened in the past happened because the energy of the event, energy of the people involved or other parties involved in the event, including our own energy at that time, coalesced in such a way that event unfolded the way it did. Had we had different energy, had the energy of times or energy of place were different, things would have unfolded differently. But we had the energy that we identified with at that particular time. The other parties involved had certain energies associated with them. The place also had its own energy, the energy of times. The zeitgeist had certain energy. As they coalesced together, the experience that we experienced was in accord with the energies that were coming together and manifested the event the way it did. In other words, everything that we experienced happened exactly the way it was supposed to experience according to the laws of nature.
It brings a very in the moment observation. Like right now, all around the world, there is a pandemic. So based on what we're sharing here, we would have to say there is some type of group focus that is setting the tone. All of us individually are on our journey, on our path. And at this moment, there's this singular event that's impacting every single one of us. And I can sit and reflect one way. I'm very fortunate. I was already retired. I have my money coming in. I'm in my house most of my time anyway. So it's not having a huge impact on me. And I don't mean to disrespect anybody for whom it's touching deeply, right? There has not been anyone in my personal life that has become ill, but I have talked to people for whom that's true. So in the reflecting on the group process of being on a path, what I hear is there's a difference between what we do and who we're being. You know, there's doing and being. It's like,
and then there is doobie doobie doo, yes.
Yeah, bring some thought to the doing and the being of this pandemic emotional experience that we're all in the middle of.
Well, I was just mentioning that everything that happened in the past happened according to the laws of nature, because the energies of the parties and the places and times coalesced together to manifest certain experiences. Now, these experiences can be perceived differently from different vantage points. Different parties involved perhaps experienced those events differently. Some might have developed anxiety as a result of those events. Others thought that it was joyful and blissful experience. Somebody else was maybe traumatized by it, or somebody else might feel completely neutral about it. either way, it's not good, it's not bad what happened, because from different vantage points, it looks differently. Now, from our vantage point that we identify with, and identity is exactly that. It's the vantage point that we identify with. The event that we experience, it can be perceived one way. Are we stuck in this identity? Are we stuck in this perspective? If we're stuck in a perspective, then of course everything looks the same all the time because we are not changing our vantage point. But if we actually give ourselves the permission to get unstuck or to expand our consciousness beyond the particular perspective that we used to and look at things from different points of view, something really amazing happens. We realize that the same experience may have different meanings from different points of view, and different people experienced it differently. Now the question is, are we stuck in our old experience of the same thing? Well, we're not, because we've just figured out how to change perspectives. It also means we are no longer stuck in experiencing things in the same way over and over again. And so even the same thing that we already experienced may be perceived differently and learned from different points of view. The same perception, principles of perception, can also be applied to whatever we experience in the future. Whatever we're going to experience in the future will also be the result of manifestation of energies coalescing, coming together, of all the parties involved, and the place and time and other forces that essentially bring about a certain experience. What are we going to experience as a result of, let's say, this pandemic that you're talking about?
Right.
Well, it depends on energies of all the parties involved and on our perspective. Because our perspective probably will be different from the perspective of another person, even our neighbor or our relative or a person living on the other side of the world. So what we do is we learn how we are not stuck in one perspective, and we have the freedom of choice to choose from which point of view to experience things that are coming in the near future. And that flexibility also gives us the ability to affect the near future because our energy will change as our perspective changes. If we change our perspective, we bring a different energy quality to the manifestation of this event. As it coalesces with all the other energies involved, it may not change it completely radically, but at least it has a certain influence on the event. And even more importantly, it has obviously influence on how we experience the event. So if we want to experience things in a more meaningful or more enlightening or more empowering manner, we actually need to look at things from a perspective associated with empowerment and enlightenment.
Right.
How do we get into that perspective? Well, it's easier said than done.
That's my next question. How do we get into that state? Right?
Yeah, how do we get into this new, more enlightened, more empowering perspective? It's really helpful to have role models because it's easier to get into somebody else's perspective if at least there is another person occupying that point of view whom we establish some degree of rapport, whom we trust, who we respect, whose perspective we would like to experience too. And so as we learn how to realign ourselves mentally, emotionally, and energetically from a different point of view with a different bandwidth of energy, we actually are guaranteed to experience things differently.
A different state of being. Because that's what I was, there's doing and there's being, and you have to raise the quality of being up so that you can have a different point of view, and it has a lot to do with the company that you keep. I'm not in a crowd of people that are panicking right now. I'm not in that energy. In fact, I'm in a crowd of people, mostly online and people like yourselves, where I literally had to stop the other day and ask myself, is there something wrong with me? Because I feel good, I feel calm, and I'm looking at the same pandemic that everybody else is looking at. But I recognize that all the development, the work that I have done for myself is paying off. That the having coaches and having the programs that I've been involved in have given me tools to work with that allow me to not freak out. And I'm not the person whose husband is sick in the hospital dying. So being somebody who can also appreciate and not negate that person's experience. And that knowing all of us a year from now, 5 years from now, whatever, we'll reflect back at this moment of our path, of our journey, and be able to say, who was I being at that moment? Did I do enough? Was there other things I could have done? What did I step over? What did I bring to everybody's journey in the process? So, how do you know when you've got a good coach? How do you know when where you are on your path is the right place to be?
That's a really good question. It basically boils down to how do we apply the same wisdom that we just discussed pertaining to the past and also the future? How can we apply it to the present moment? And that's exactly the crux of the matter. We learn how to recognize that whatever is happening in the present moment, even if the spouse is being sick and dying, or ourselves being sick and dying, or somebody else suffering, or the whole world is going to hell in a handbasket. None of it is a problem. It's only a problem if we get stuck in a perspective looking at the event through the lens filter of perception that turns pretty much everything into a problem, polarizing everything into either good or bad. And so if something is good, we want that. If something is bad, and we want to run away from it. This polarized way of looking at things, where everything is either good or bad, causes us to develop attachment to things that we deem good and aversion to those things that we deem bad. This dualistic way of perceiving everything and acting based on attachment and aversion is the cause of suffering.
Because the person in the middle of that serious concern for a loved one may not have the capacity to reflect enough to say there's other points of views to get some relief from it. They're going to be, I'm imagining this, in the swamp of their emotional state, panic and fear and all those things that would come up. And yet others, we can sit in the background and say, not to be flippant, but this too will pass, right? And know that human beings are still going to be here 5 years, 10, 100 years from now.
If they're not around 10 or 5 years from now, is that a problem? No, it isn't. The Earth will march on.
Yes, it will.
Maybe it will be better off with less pollution and less of a cancer on the face of planet Earth, which the humans basically are. Seeking growth for the sake of growth. Now, what we learn is how nothing of that is something to be attached to, whether it's our own life of other people, the values that we thought were important, or even the existence of humankind. If we develop this Zen-like, relatively stoic attitude, something really amazing happens. We stop suffering from attachment and aversion syndrome.
Makes the journey a lot more enjoyable if you're not in a state of suffering.
Well, that's what we call nirvana. Right. The state of freedom from suffering is nirvana. If we serve as the role model of people who experience freedom from suffering, not because we're flippant and we think that other people are just delusional and they are making the mountain out of a molehill. No, we have compassion because we have the ability to expand beyond our perspective. we visit other perspectives and we recognize the validity of other perspectives, and at the same time we don't get stuck in it. Right. That expansion of consciousness is something that engenders both empowerment and enlightenment. Empowerment because you tap into a lot more energy resources as you expand your consciousness to embrace a lot more bandwidth that we used to. It literally allows much more energy to flow through your system. And the increased put through is something that you can put to good use. And at the same time, you don't have to impose your power on other people. So you learn how to be powerful instead of having power.
Instead of doing, just doing. Yeah.
At the same time, it also is an enlightening experience or way of looking at things because it gives you much greater perspective. So much so that when you look at things from a lot of different points of view, rather than just one narrow point of view, you can see things a lot more clearly. You understand the cause and effect connections a lot better, and understanding of the law of cause and effect, also known as karma, is right. Exactly what allows us to experience enlightenment. Well, why? Because lack thereof, lack of awareness of cause and effect, is exactly what causes endarkenment, or basically living in the world of samsara, or suffering.
Right.
So this is a clear path that allows us to experience both empowerment and enlightenment at the same time. But it's not easy to be on this path because there aren't a lot of role models of being on this path. Right. So we might as well learn how to become role models for others. It's almost like, don't we wish that somebody were a role model for you to emulate, so that you would just do guru yoga, you would just be like that person, and you would be enlightened and empowered. But instead, we actually have to be our own guru. We have to learn how to become that light for other people that we wish we had.
So if I kind of look at this whole conversation, I can sum it up and say all of us are on a path or a journey, whether we did it intentionally or not, and that learning to not say that was good, that was bad, having an objective observation of all the experiences along the way opens up new opportunities that if we're refusing, this is bad, that can't happen, the doors are closed there. There's no opportunity to grow from that. So holding that objective point of view and recognizing that it's not just me on a path. We're all on this trip together, right? And that what I do does influence other people. So to consciously choose that my path is for the betterment of everyone, not just myself, opens up the possibility of a more enjoyable journey for all of us, in that sense, and finding good people to be with. So I really want to point out the fact how much I enjoy being in your company, because it has come to me as a part of those different turning points in my life when I said, this way of being doesn't resonate with me anymore. I want to be here in the company of people that find my value, support my value, and whose values I support. So thank you for showing up in my journey.
Well, you just dreamed me up. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Right. It literally is like that. When we become clear about our values start working for us, as opposed to often values working against us. If we have unconscious values in our value system or in our belief system that are sabotaging our development or our progress, or just undermining our ability to live our lives fully. And so as we let go of some of those values or reevaluate our values in such a way that we become really conscious about what is a value that I subscribe to, or I uphold, or I stand for, And we actually start walking the talk. We start actually standing up for those values that are important to us and not fret about those that aren't. That we immediately experience change in the quality of our lives. And that's what my coaching is very much about. So you're coming back to your question about how to choose teachers and coaches who would help us to be on our path. Well, that's basically what the coach or what the real quality teacher would do. That coach or that teacher would actually empower us to become real clear about our values and pursue those values at the expense of perhaps old and outmoded values that no longer serve us. We let those go and we actually start reprioritizing our values so that the ones that are on top of the list of our priorities now get satisfied through our actions or our following our path.
I appreciate it. It's nice to know that there are others like myself that are on an intentional journey. It took me a while for it to become focused and intentional. I still find myself sometimes meandering, wondering where the heck am I going, but it doesn't take much to remind myself again, oh, yeah, this is a big journey and I'm on it and I have choice in the matter.
And you manifested what you experience as the current state of your affairs. That at some point on your journey was a dream. And you literally have manifested that dream, consciously
Right.
or unconsciously. Now, if you become conscious of the fact that you are living a dream, it may not be perfect. There is always room for improvement, but you can say that now I'm actually living the dream that I had back then. You immediately transform your attitude towards your current state of affairs. You cannot dread your current state of affairs. You cannot dread your life. You cannot try to run away from it if you're living a dream.
Right.
It's not the end of this path. Hopefully, you can also take the next step and use this current one as a stepping stone. So you'll experience another dream and another dream. And if you recognize that in each and every next step will also be a manifestation of another dream that you had at some point, you actually recognize that you are living a dream. And who wouldn't want that?
It's powerful. When you said that, I recognized that at this moment, there are layers of different dreams showing up in this moment. That some of them may have begun more recently, some of them may have been coming from many, many years ago. I have recently, because my body said, you have no choice in the matter, you need to get healthy, okay, put that as a focus in my life and recognize that had I started that part of my path in my 20s, I would be in a completely different place. But I can't undo tell the truth, 40 years that I wasn't focused on that. Now I have to take the time and energy to make it right, to have the dream that will put me back in alignment with good health and fitness and well-being, as well as, things that are true, like good company and satisfied with my place and my possessions and things that are working well. So,
yes, indeed.
yeah.
That level of contentment is important. And at the same time, there's always room for improvement. So being okay with how the life is right now doesn't mean that we quit improving it. And at the same time, it's important to have a solid foundation to be able to take the next step from. If we don't have a leg to stand on, so to speak, or we are on really shaky foundation right now, the current stepping stone that we are standing on is like quicksand. We're just sinking into it. We don't have the solid foundation to even take one next step in from. And so we learn how to recognize that this current state of affairs is not a bad thing, it's not a good thing. We just accept it for what it is, recognize how energetically it's in alignment with certain things that allowed it to coalesce. And then we see the cause and effect, how certain experiences or events in the past made this particular state of affairs manifest. Okay, if we see how that worked, can we translate that or extrapolate it into the future? How can we make the future steps to be even more empowered and enlightened than our current ones? If we make each and every step that we take along this path even more empowered and more enlightened than the previous one, that would be one heck of an empowered, enlightened path.
Yeah, and I want to be on the journey with a lot of people. So I want to take the opportunity to invite people to come get in this conversation, because hopefully there'll be people listening to this recording that are saying, what's my purpose? What path am I on? And maybe this will give them some place to check in and get some guidance and direction and put them in a good place with their fellows on the planet.
Yes, just visit enlighteningcoaching.com. Enlighteningcoaching.com is one of my many websites. You can actually book a complimentary coaching session at no charge, no strings attached. Get yourself a world-class quality strategy session that will help you figure out where you are in relation to where you want to be and how to progress from where you are to where you want to be, so that you develop a game plan that you can follow step by step. And if you need more coaching, well, of course, there's also more coaching available, so we can basically just take you by the hand and help you travel this path. And I hope that we will travel together and we'll thoroughly enjoy each other's company. Just like I enjoyed your company, Marcia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I've enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate it. And we'll have many more, I'm sure.
Thank you. And let me remind our viewers and listeners, you just enjoyed another episode of The Secrets of Qigong Masters, the talk show brought to you by Academy of Qidao, the first and only school in the world offering professional training in Qigong coaching. Please go to qigongcoaching.com to find out about our programs and to learn how you too can become a certified Qigong coach. I look forward to working with you. Until our next time, when our paths cross, namaste.